Hello, I'm Edward Viljoen, and this is From the Center, where we like to talk to regular, ordinary people like you and me about the journeys through life, especially those parts that are difficult and challenging, to discover how spirituality can help us. With me today is somebody that I know and love and have known and loved for a very, very long time, Evan Dow Williamson. In fact, I was just sitting here thinking about the very first time that I met Evan, and he was just uh, a very small, tiny, I think I'd like to say elf, and that's become a favorite word of Evan's. So he
Definitely.
came to the center and has really grown up in the center and has been immersed in this spiritual tradition where we are motivated by a compelling vision of a world that works for everyone. But the truth of it is that Evan and I were discussing right before we started recording is sometimes it can look too glossy on the outside. And the reality is that some of us have really tough challenges, and they can be in ordinary things, like in the world of dating or in getting jobs or being unfairly treated, or it can be just having ordinary challenges with depression. All sorts of things happen in the world for a regular person like you and me.
hmm
And then what we do to meet those challenges, that's what's so interesting.
Well, I've recently started, I guess, a new job, um, and really having that pull a lot of my time. Um, and I guess this is the first things we were talking about before is the first things when you ask a question is the glossy things show up.
Yeah. Well, you've been struggling with keeping a balance with your personal time and
Absolutely.
time at the office.
Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and s- and so how's that going?
Well, it's easy to get absorbed into the work, especially when it's work that that you care about, and that you really want to make sure that you're doing a good job at, to make sure that you're that that I need to feel appreciated and the work appreciates me, and that I can feel like I'm getting things done and such like that. Um, so it can be exhausting.
What advice do you have for somebody who's facing a similar challenge, uh, like a person in a new job like you? What are you doing to make sure you have boundaries and a balance?
Well, it's really. I was talking to a friend last night about this, with me starting in my work and her starting with work at home, and we were talking about our different strategies. And really, what it was is taking it out and taking time out for ourselves, is really making sure that in the busy life, in the job world or in personal life, just to really have time to sit down, to breathe, to to stop,
So you
whatever it is you're
mean
doing.
that literally, breathe is the strategy. To
Absolutely.
sit and breathe. Do you do anything in particular? Do you have some routine when you sit?
hmm
Because some people count their breath, some
hmm
people stare at an object. What do you do when you're sitting down?
Well, it's kind of like staring out into space.
Hmm.
You know, people would say it looks like daydreaming, but really what it is that I'm able to, whether with eyes open or eyes closed, to really focus in on my breathing, and that becomes just something that happens naturally, and I don't think about it, and I just kind of let all the different things float into my mind, and then I let them float out
Okay.
again. And so
So,
it's an emptying process.
so why would somebody call this a spiritual practice? It sounds just like common sense.
Right. Well, that's part of spiritual practice in my mind, is that part of it is common sense. And what it allows me to do is to refresh, that that part of myself that's getting maybe a little too tight, a little too crazy, a little too into the work, and to basically um, start anew from that moment. If I'm getting too stressed out, or if I'm getting too wound up or caught up in my work, just to take a second, maybe walk out of the office or just step back from the desk for a second, close my eyes, breathe, and and then when I open my eyes, I can take one thing at a time. This is the thing I'm chewing on for a little while, and I can and I can work through that.
Well, we talked about this same moment. I call it a moment of sanity.
Mhm.
Call it common sense. And how important it is to take that breath in other circumstances in life where we might get carried away.
Mhm.
And the one I'm thinking about in particular is when a young person might meet somebody that they're interested in romantically.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because stuff happens,
Right.
and we can get carried away in the same way that you can get carried away in a new job.
Mhm.
Has that ever happened to you?
Gee, no, I don't know absolutely anything of what you're talking about. Yes, yes, it has. Uh, I have a tendency in my own life when I meet somebody that I find fascinating, that I get caught up in, in that I really just want to be next to that person, and sometimes I guess I can come on a little too strong.
Yeah, and that's
Uh,
frightening.
it can be.
Yeah.
It can be.
And so have you been able to make that adjustment to pause and breathe and give them space?
Mm-hmm.
Does it
Mm-hmm.
work better or worse for you?
Well, the last time I tried it, she didn't call me back. But I think I'm going to chalk that one up to practice. But it's an interesting shift because it's a different groove to put myself in, to how to balance of, hey, I'm really interested in you, but I'm at the same time just kind of like allowing the space for somebody to be themselves and such like that.
Well, because there really is a spiritual idea in this approach that you're taking on, that I don't have to cling and I don't have to maneuver and control the
Right.
world around me, that
Right.
there's an innate goodness and an innate attraction that's available to me. But when I'm not believing that,
Mhm.
that's when I'm very clingy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like to me that that's exactly what you're talking about. You're learning about something that has to do with your place in the universe,
Mhm.
that you're okay.
Right. Yeah, and the idea that I don't have to compensate that, because that's what it is. When when I feel clingy or anything else, what I'm trying to do is I feel like I need to compensate for what I feel I'm not.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of going back to the spiritual aspect of it, is that I am who I am, and that's perfect.
Yeah.
And just who I am and everything that I am and everything I'm not.
Yeah.
And if I can remember that, and when I remember that, I don't need any of the antics or pizzazz,
Mhm.
or to try and put my best foot forward.
And I think when you know that from watching you, that the recovery from disappointment is quicker.
Hmm.
It's like when you're fit
Right.
and you're running up the hill, the recovery from being out of breath is faster.
Hmm.
So now, of course, disappointment happens, and
Sure.
you can have appropriate disappointment, but the recovery is faster because there's less clinging.
Right.
Now, I would call that spiritual.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have to people in the dating world about disappointment?
Well, it's the hardest thing is taking it personally,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that there was something wrong with me. Going back to the idea of the girl never called me back, I can take that a number of ways of going, well, she never called me back because there must be something wrong with me, or she didn't like the way that I smiled or I laughed, or there's something something there, and the idea of, no, it really wasn't, and there's a reason that never continued. That was the experience, just as it is, and that's all it needed to be. It didn't need to go beyond that. And to make sure that, for taking it personal, is that they chose not to engage or re-engage for their own reasons, and it had nothing to do with you in the first place.
And isn't it sometimes the case when you do force the issue and you do push it through and you do make it last longer than its
Mhm.
shelf life, then that's when the trouble starts.
Absolutely.
Have you had an experience of that without giving any names because this is being viewed on the World Wide Web.
Hmm. Yes, I have. I had a relationship that lasted, wow, I think 2 years. 2 years strung out. So it wasn't a continuous thing. This person and I dated for, I'd say about 7-ish months or so, and then we called it off, and we continued, in a relationship style.
Yeah, so it wasn't a clean break.
Absolutely not.
And so it lingered.
It did.
And how did that work for you?
It was torturous, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
It was the idea of, okay, when I'm with you, I feel with you, and then when we're apart, I don't know, am I supposed to behave this way around you, or if we're around other people? Am I supposed to behave this certain way, like as pretending that nothing's happening, that I have absolutely no feelings for this person.
So there was a lot of confusion.
Hmm.
And at that point, you weren't yet strong with the letting go practice.
Absolutely not. I would get sucked into the spiral,
Yeah.
and basically chase that rabbit all the way down the hole, and get stuck there, and slump into pretty dark places, where I would be sad and gloomy and depressed, and what that you would usually transform into, for me, was I would become angry and irritable, because it was uncomfortable for me to feel sad, and that being sad is seen as a weakness. So if I'm sobby or weepy or anything like that, that can be viewed as a weak thing, and so then not only am I feeling hurt or sad with this situation, but then I'm beating myself up.
Yeah, and all of it a result of not having that awareness of letting go can be okay.
Yeah.
And then your sadness, appropriate sadness, could have come and gone at its ordinary time. So if you had it all to do again, and I know this is a difficult question to ask, because you have to use your imagination, but what would you do differently?
I don't know if I'd do anything differently because of the experience that I went through and how much it actually taught me, and to see where I am now. But if I could go back to that earlier time and still still have the full lesson, it would have been basically to see that there was a call for love. And that's what we were really both looking for, this person and I, is that we both, in our own way, wanted to feel loved and respected, and seen and appreciated.
Now you're not in a relationship.
No, I am not.
Are you feeling loved and respected and seen?
Yeah, actually I am. And a lot of that comes from, it's me who loves me, and I'm respecting myself, and I see myself.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm my own best friend. But it's really, I mean, you can't do that for somebody else. You can't be that for somebody else without truly loving yourself,
Yeah.
or really, really, being solid in yourself before you can move past that.
What advice would you have for a young person who's in one of those on again, off again, ambivalent relationships?
Take a stand.
Take a stand.
Yeah. So take some time for yourself.
And when you did that, what shifted for you? What new view on your world did you have?
When I took the time for myself, and I allowed that process to be to happen through me, it was that I was happy just being by myself, that I could be happy with myself being by myself, that I didn't need this other person to be present, to know that I was seen or heard or loved, is that I could do that for myself.
My name is Edward Viljoen, and this is from the Center. And with me is Evan Dow Williamson, and I hope I'll be seeing you soon. Goodbye.